More than perhaps any other game, Hyper Light Drifter is cryptic and vague with its exposition, leaving almost everything open to interpretation. Even From Software's games, famous for having the player infer the backstory themselves, gave you concrete item and character names to work with. In Hyper Light Drifter, the only difference we're told about our guns is that the ones on the right have more pixels, and as the community was left in charge of coming up with boss names, we now have enemies called Sterling Archer and Priscilla the Parrot. If you haven't been following the development of the game, you probably wouldn't have even known that the Drifter's signature sword is made of phase-shifted hard light. In other words, it's a lightsaber. There will be massive spoilers ahead as I delve into the past of how the four continents ended up as ruined and bleak as they did, right up to the Drifter's final place in the world, and what exactly it is that follows him. Most information we have comes from the text of the prophetic monoliths scattered around the world by their creators. Written in a language that needs to be translated outside the game, they each speak to the fate of the area you find them in, and activating them all shows another passage with a less cryptic meaning. One of the members of this ancient race appears to trigger the monoliths whenever you first activate them, although nobody knows for sure if this is the only living member to survive, an echo of the past, or just one of a now hidden species. This species are referred to as the Librarians, and were the ones to originally create the Titans that are decaying and shattered by the time our Drifter arrives. Going forward an unknown amount of time, past whatever caused the extinction or fall of the Librarian race, there are four major animal-like cultures in the region. Raccoons in the west, birds in the north, otters in the east, and lizards the south. The races work together and harness the power of a mysterious pink power source that is found throughout the game, the same substance that was used by librarians to power their titans. This discovery causes them to research into the advanced technology of the previous race and its methods of creating life. The Coalition believe they could use the power of their god, a Halo Jackal, to create what they call a perfect immortal cell that could grant them immortality. Although it isn't specified, I believe this to be a biological cell that would have to be implanted into the races through genetic modification, and that if the Librarians reached this point in the past, they chose not to alter their own beings, leading to their eventual fall. This jackal god plays an important role in the present day storyline, and I'll refer to it as Anubis because of its resemblance to the Egyptian deity. Anubis' form of a jackal-headed human is also included in the game as a playable character, exclusive to Kickstarter backers, with much the same abilities as our Drifter, and referred to as female. The creation of this god-powered cell is what the Librarians refer to in their final message. Harnessing a great wellspring, a perfect immortal cell was crafted, to be imbued within all sentient life, a noble goal, though such power terrified others and brought ruin, as its purpose was transmogrified, the abhorrent cell still festers deep in the chambers of this world. The Great Wellspring denotes the source of power within Anubis that the races have managed to harness, and as Anubis is the god of the afterlife, it makes sense that her abilities would help the races achieve their goal of immortality. The others that are said to be terrified of this power are either certain members within the four races, or different species such as the frogs in the east or the drifters. Understandably, the four main races having the ability to choose who gets the right to live forever would be a terrifying thing for them. The cell's purpose being transmogrified refers to the sudden change that caused the dark sentience that follows the Drifter to appear. We have no information on the reason for this change except that the severing of the world and the afterlife seems like an idea always prone to backfiring. However, we do know, from the Steam trading cards, that this entity is called Judgment, after the tarot card of resurrection or rebirth. Almost instantly after this change came the massive explosion we see in the intro, causing huge devastation to the landscape and killing almost all of the ones on the surface. Judgment likely managed this using the full power of the wellspring that it now has access to. Upon realising what had happened to their perfect cell, the scientists who created it managed to seal it underground, and therefore limit the amount of Anubis' power it had access to, before they too were killed. Using its diminished, but still almost godlike powers, and the pink energy source, Judgment reactivated the four Titans and set them on the remaining survivors. A long and bloody battle was fought between the animal forces and the Titans. Using cannon weaponry developed in the Southern Labs, the Titans were eventually beaten, although not before causing heavy losses. The Raccoon Hermit in the west tells of how they formed gunnery teams and modified the cannons to use green power crystals, eventually managing to destroy the Titan, only for the crystals to overload and create the regenerating emeralds that fill the forest, trapping many of the raccoons inside. The boss of this area, the Raccoon King, was a victim to the crystals, but remained alive until the Drifter set him free, possibly explaining why he attacks you, as an eon of being trapped inside the crystal would have probably driven him insane. The eastern area also managed to defeat their titan, as did the Birds of the North, and the remains of both can be seen in the middle of their ruined cities. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the war for these regions. In the wetlands, the frog people rose up and shattered the peace by killing and enslaving the surviving otter people, leaving their corpses and piked skulls throughout the city. Only a few of the otters survive, huddled in a church, hiding from the naturally violent frogs. On the northern mountain, which houses a sort of monastery, a new religious sect led by Hierophant, the first boss, takes over, using ritual altars for sacrifices and killing all those who practice the old religion. The only known survivor of this genocide is the birdman you see on the way up the mountain, living alone and caring for several normal birds. He is one of the priests of the old peaceful belief. After seeing the violent sect take over, he managed to rescue a few eggs from the mountain hatchery and escape just as it was being burned to the ground. This brings us to present day and the backstory of our Drifter. Drifters in this world are the collectors of forgotten knowledge, lost technologies and broken histories, and we see several of them, although only two are still alive, the Pink Drifter and our central town drunk. This means it is a job or a nomadic culture rather than something unique to our Drifter, and it's likely what he spent his life doing before the events of the game. Anubis and Judgment, still intertwined and at war over control of their power, seek only to destroy the other to regain their full strength. Being unable to do this herself, Anubis seeks the help of drifters, who she guides to the immortal cell using visions, and this is what begins the story of Hyperlight Drifter. The opening starts with Anubis touching the mind of the Drifter to show a vision of how the world used to be and the history of what has happened so far, including the piles of bodies from the Titan Wars. Judgment uses the opportunity of Anubis contacting her new champion to inflict a terminal illness on them, knowing that if they survive to destroy the cell, then Judgment will be destroyed along with it. This is when the Drifter is first afflicted with the crippling sickness he fights throughout the game, manifesting as a vision of Judgment's black form. As Anubis continues to show the Drifter the origins of the perfect cell, Judgment uses his manifestation to cloud his mind to try and prevent him learning anything about the cell that could help him find it, which causes him to pass out and reawaken on a shoreline near the central city. After getting a first glimpse of the city, the Drifter is again overcome by Judgment's illness and is rescued by the Pink Drifter. Also a champion of Anubis, the Pink Drifter has been afflicted with the illness too, and has already watched his family die to the disease. He has also saved several others from similar situations, including the central town vendor who was ambushed by the machines in the southern factory while searching for goods to sell. The Pink Drifter lets you rest in his house, and as you recover gifts the Drifter with a map of the area, instructing him to collect modules in order to gain access to the Immortal Cell's chambers. Our Drifter meets up with Pink a few more times throughout his travels, and he helps by telling us the location of the nearby modules he's found. Being much further along in Judgment's disease, it's possible that he no longer thinks he has the strength to get to them himself, so he passes the quest on to the Drifter, before eventually perishing like the other Drifters before him. After activating the final module, our Drifter returns to the city and descends into the Perfect Cell's chambers. After a climactic final battle with Judgment, either a mental or physical form, he manages to plunge his sword into the cell, shattering it and destroying Judgment for good. The Drifter is now too weak to carry on, and the player realises that breaking the cell has not cured him. Anubis reappears and leads the Drifter outside. It's possible that she was the one keeping him alive against a force that should have killed him long ago, and that, as her power was destroyed along with the cell, she can no longer stop him from dying. As the Drifter lays to rest against what he thinks is the shoreline from the beginning of the game, Anubis watches him pass on. We see several pieces of imagery implying Anubis' departure from the world, including the shattering of the emblem representing the Perfect Cell's creation, and the dissolving of the crown-like wellspring that always hovered over the kingdom. It's not clear if this represents her permanent death from the world or just the beginning of a rebirth cycle, as the survivors of each race start again without the corrupting influence of Judgment. But before she departs, she grants the Drifter a final vision of an open ocean in the world above, letting the Drifter die in the land he saved rather than the reality of the crumbling cavern that his body will be buried in. Thanks for watching my interpretation of Hyperlight Drifter. Please tell me any alternate theories you have, and I hope you enjoyed the video.